Welcome to We the World and our 2025 Manifesting the Dream event. Each year, we take time to remember Martin Luther King Jr. and his beloved community. And each year, we are thrilled to feature the many people and organizations who have taken action to be of service, not only in January and February, but all year round. We at We the World welcome you to take action and be of service at we.net/MLK from January 15th to February 28th. Please join us in being a part of this annual celebration and consider being of service in your communities and with us. Of course, donations are very appreciated at we.net/donate. My name is Jana Larsen, and I am the HR Deputy Director of We the World. Today we are welcoming three guests, Lily, Mitzy, and Shannon, but we will start with Lily, or Lilian, as she is also known. Lilian Calvache is an accomplished Colombian professional specializing in economic justice, cultural intelligence, and sustainable development. As a member of the Executive Council of the International Union for Land Value Taxation, she advances global policies on equitable taxation and economic reform. A recognized pioneer in land value tax education, Lilian has led strategic international projects in Colombia, fostering social progress through innovative, collaborative solutions. She is a sought after speaker addressing economic justice, cultural intelligence, and corporate social responsibility on global platforms. She is also the creator of the Global Nexus of Communications podcast, exploring intercultural dialogue, technology, and social change. She is also the author of Global Diaspora: Cultivating Your Cultural and Collective Intelligence, a guide for global leadership. With over 20 years of experience in project management, intercultural teaching, and digital strategy, Lilian combines academic expertise with practical leadership. Holding a master's in international business, she continues to drive impactful initiatives that promote inclusive and sustainable global development. Welcome, Lily or Lilian. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me here. It's an honor for me to be again here with you all. And this presentation, I really would like us to explore on this important subject, which is conflict. It's an inherent part of community evolution. And my part humbly here is how cultural intelligence and ancestral wisdom can come together, can serve as this powerful tool for healing. We will be talking about that too. And if we go back to our roots, we can see that we can be integrating indigenous perspectives with modern conflict resolutions. And those strategies that we need them so much today. I will try to show you how understanding these diverse cultures and histories can be the bridge that connects these divides nowadays. So I'm in fostering unity and building stronger communities. Thank you for inviting me again.
Thank you. And then let's bring in Mitzy and Shannon, and I'll introduce each of them, and then we can have a little conversation afterwards. Next, we have Mitzy Clementina. She is an initiated medicine carrier in the Andean tradition, dedicated to healing and reconnection through ancestral practices and cosmovision. Her work, Calvache, focuses on guiding individuals back into an harmonious relationship with themselves and the interconnected world. With a degree in organizational behavior and management, specializing in predictive human behavior and ethical change management, Mitzy co founded Humanize, an initiative that humanizes data for social issues and grassroots change. Through this platform, she amplifies the voices of local activists and equips them with data driven and digital resources to drive meaningful impact. As a diplomatic interpreter in Indigenous spaces, she has facilitated cross cultural dialogue, supporting the unification of diverse traditions through the shared prophecies that mark this era as a pivotal moment for balance and survival. Currently, Mitzy collaborates with mission driven organizations across Latin America advocating for the legal recognition and protection of ancestral land rights and facilitating the safe transport of ceremonial resources essential to Indigenous spiritual traditions. And then we have grandmother, or I should say great grandmother, Shannon Crossbear, and she is dedicated to demonstrating and promoting gentle healing, a commitment deeply rooted in her personal and community history. Her leadership emerged as a response to systemic disparities affecting friends and relatives, driving her to advocate for improved outcomes in mental health, child welfare, and family well being. She has provided facilitation and consultation for organizations such as the National Indian Child Welfare Association, the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health, also known as FREDLA, Georgetown University, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, and the Surgeon General's Conference on Children's Mental Health. She specializes in supporting tribal and non tribal communities by integrating traditional interventions with culturally congruent and trauma informed practices. With extensive experience across the contiguous United States, Alaska, and Canada, she has worked to implement systemic changes that enhance the well being of children and families. Her efforts have supported early childhood development, parenting programs, and services for transition aged youth, young adults, and families facing mental health and substance use challenges. A skilled facilitator of trauma informed community engagement, Shannon has been instrumental in elevating stakeholder voices at local and national levels. Through her work in behavioral health initiatives, she continues to champion sustainable, culturally grounded solutions for healing and transformation. What incredible work you all do. We are lucky to have you here. And so let's talk about all of this. What can we do? What can others do? How can we learn and be advocates ourselves and work to bridge divides? Who wants to start? Lily, you're muted, by the way.
Well, I'll begin with some words that I heard over the winter solstice from Hereditary Chief Phil Lane that I feel like is a really great way to start this conversation as it relates to the importance of it, of his time. He was relaying how these times coming up would be an increased time of chaos, but that increased time of chaos was really up to us to determine what that meant, meaning that chaos has a lot of different meanings. And if we see the chaos for what it really is, which is a rebirth or the ending of an old paradigm shift and the inviting of a new paradigm shift, then we begin to see things a little bit differently. And the stakes are much higher now, right? So I think it brings conversations like conflict to be very important for us to consider right now because society, civilization has never been free of conflict. Individually, we are never free of conflict, both with each other and with ourselves. But thank goodness we have such a large body of wisdom that exists both today and from our ancestors who can benefit in our trajectory forward. But I think that it's really important that, this is a really critical time where that sense of community is now more important now than ever, right? So as we forge that community, the conversation of conflict is going to become a little bit more up in the forefront. And it's not to say that we should eliminate conflict. It's really more of like, how do we use it as a useful tool, both for ourselves and as society? So I wanted to open up with that so that, anybody who's viewing this can also understand how important that is, why these times are making these sort of conversations more important than ever.
Shannon, do you have anything to say about that?
Well, first of all, I mean, in the way maganak nakishnaka wabagonis, gichi oningaming Indigenous. I just wanted to stop and greet you in the language, in the Ojibwe language. And as I greeted you as my relatives, right? And so I actually have been having this discussion about conflict. I'm involved with a group of people who are working very diligently in an anti-racist decolonization effort. And so, of course, conflict is a part of that conversation. And I was reflecting the other day about, my elders who are now on the other side of the veil, as they say, and no longer on this earth walk. But one of the things that my father impressed upon us was that actually that conflict, the words "I disagree" were the first words to be said in any process of learning. And that it's only within that conflict, within that disagreement, that you have an opportunity to do things differently. And as we were talking about conflict the other day in a group of people, we were talking about just everybody's reaction to conflict, what we bring into it culturally, what we were raised with, how we feel about conflict, whether we're afraid of conflict, whether we embrace conflict, whether how we engage with conflict. All of those things are so important as we move forward. And it's interesting because many times in the English language, we use the term working through conflict. Like the conflict is there, and then you work through it and you get to something called resolution, right? And I would I find answers even embedded within language, right? Because we know when we speak a different language, as all of us in this room do, that at some point we think in that language, right? And the way that we see the world, the way we think about the world is embedded in the language. So in Ojibwe Moan, people don't say to work through conflict. It's how are you working with conflict? And some of the conflict that we're experiencing are very long-term conflicts. And it doesn't mean that those conflicts are necessarily going to be resolved. But how do we work? I mean, these are questions that I think that we grapple with, right? In terms of what is the process by which we work with conflict? How do we work with conflict in a way that we don't rupture relationship? And if we do rupture relationship, that we have a process by which we can go to repair that rupture. And so, we are in conflictual times, and not just within our human beings, but we find conflict in so many, in our environmental climate, in our political climate, in our community climates, so how are we learning to use those things to really think deeply about, and I really liked both Lilian and Mitzy referring to what is it that we can learn from those that have come before us. And in terms of ways of working with conflict or how conflict shows up. And I always go back to our old stories. Like, we have some great stories, right? And what are embedded in those stories about what happened when people were in conflict and how they moved into that conflict or moved with that conflict. And I always like, there was a story that I was told when I was young that was really about these two women who really were in conflict a lot, right? They were really, all kinds of things were happening, and they were in conflict with each other, and they couldn't get along, and there was lot of a lot of things that were happening that were not positive. And the resolution of the elders was that they had to be in relationship. They created a relationship because one of the women was required to serve the other woman for a period of time. And then it reversed the other way around, where the other woman was required to serve. So of course, the first woman, was very conscious of what she was doing, because she knew there was going to be a later time where she was going to be the one of service. So, she wanted to make that go well. But what happened in the process, right? How they created a relationship, how they created this kinship and understood it, really shifted. And there are different examples of how that comes about. And we know, like with restorative justice efforts and other kinds of things, of how important it is to keep that relationship at the center. And having things, for me as an Indigenous person and for the teachings that I've had, having things like the 7 grandfather teachings or processes by which, we have a pathway to get to something, right? And it doesn't really matter what that pathway is, as long as you are committed to following that pathway. So whether that be a pipe ceremony, whether that be an inipi, a sweat lodge, whether that be some other form of that one goes through, I think it's the process, right? It's the giving a container for those things. Anyway, I'm going to stop. I am very excited to have this conversation, because I do agree with what Mitzy and Lilian were saying about, hey, this is a part of our reality. So how are we going to do this in the most healthy way that we can, knowing that we're in a process of deconstruction of colonialism? So thanks.
I have a question. Is there an equivalent in the Ojibwe language that is similar or that has the gist of agreeing to disagree?
I'd have to think about that a little. Yeah, I think there's, of course there is, it's your camp and my camp, right? I mean, even within our, but so.
But really, agreeing to disagree means you're not really working through the problem, right? You're just
Well,
like,
and maybe that's not necessary. It's really interesting, because we think, like, say that there's a group of people. I'm going to use actually a Lakota terminology of your Tuahi, your grouping, your kind of the folks you hang out with, right? That
oh,
and you go to ceremony with or whatever, and say that there's one person within there who doesn't approve of the way that you're doing it, or has some other thing that is directing them. It's not about, oh, you have to go to this one thing. The mentality of the either or that comes from even like Christianity, of you're either saved or you're not, or you either think my way or you're wrong.
my way or the highway.
But
Yeah.
to me, it's like, yeah, go ahead, go up, set up another lodge. Yay, the more the merrier, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it really is about honoring sovereignty, self-sovereignty, and each other's sovereignty. And And that's why I say those 7 grandfather teachings, because, if I apply those humility, respect, love, wisdom, if I bravery, all those things, if I apply them to the conflict, then I have a way to work with that conflict, right?
Yeah,
And still honor that difference.
right. Well, and in the end, I mean, if you agree to disagree, you could, I mean, there are many ways you could interpret that, but it could also be just saying you're just honoring, all right, we have different opinions. That's fine. We can live with that. What do you both think? Is agreeing to somewhere I was thinking of it because somewhere I read agreeing to disagree is like stupid. I was thinking, why?
Yeah, I don't think it is. I mean, I think what we need is maybe a reframing of our relationship with conflict. Not every conflict needs to be resolved, right? I really
Yeah.
appreciate Shannon's perspective on like, why is it that we're always associating conflict with something that needs to be resolved, as if we cannot permit it to exist? And I think therein lies the nature of the imbalance. And notice how I'm using the word relationship with conflict, because I think then if we were to rephrase it that way, then the dynamic with it completely shifts. But I do want to hear a little bit more about Lily. She has an amazing book
Mhm.
that is coming out, and I think that it's going to really offer a lot of reflections. I wonder, Lily, if you can kind of share with us a little bit about the inspiration of your book and what it talks about.
Yeah, thank you, Mitzy. Thank you, Shannon. I am just here enjoying the conversation. Both of you have this great wisdom. It's so nice to be in the environment where you can just share all these important subjects that are needed worldwide. And thank you for your question, Mitzi. The idea of starting this book was because as I am a person, excuse me, a person that lives the day by day into this global diaspora, and we have so many different backgrounds. One day I was just like thinking, why are we all divided? Why are we in this kind of setting where we are not free to say what we want to say in a way we don't harm other people's feelings, because our intention is not doing that. Our intention is to contribute to better the world, and we all have that common denominator. In these diasporas, for example, I have studied them for about 10 years now, and I have come to a question that I thought was the reason why I wrote my book, and is how can we bridge divides, heal communities, and create a lasting unity in a world that is often divided by conflict. So that's when I started exploring the intersection of why are we fighting, why are we arguing, why are discarding. In the case of some diasporas, we focus more deeply into these activists. So why do they have conflicts? Why do they argue? What do we argue? And we explore this intersection between justice, conflict, and community. And then is when I kind of piece it together and I put it in a book. Has like 7 volumes. So this is volume number 1. And then I was like, okay, but now this book, I want to be more like interactive, more like to arrive to other people. So I created the Global Nexus of Communication, where I interviewed some people from the diaspora from different countries, and they all had the same kind of feeling that dives deeper into how we can solve this. So I thought of this bridge that could connect the part that we're looking for and the part that we cannot. So that is called cultural intelligence. In my mind, in my world, I was like, well, if we are trying to understand each other, and if we know that we all are intelligent, that we are all smart people, and we want just to help to make this world a better place, to leave a legacy, then how about if we get together and we create collective wisdom? So then I was like, this is kind of like a great place where we can get together and try to find solutions to the same problem. So let's just work on by like goals, objectives together. But let's see this action that we want to do, because most of us, we get together, we sit down, we discuss, but then there is no action. And that's why I created Global Nexus of Communication in Action, because it brings journalists, YouTubers, people that like to be in social media, and any of them can just come and talk about any of the issues that they consider important, but mainly they bring a proposal. It's not just the problem, it's also about the solution, but important, the action, the proposal. So we can just get together and solve it. So that's part of like the summary of the book. And in these 7 volumes, I was just thinking about these strategies and the tools for navigating these complex dynamics. And I think it can serve as a guide to those looking to apply principles in real life settings. It's not like everybody gets along well everywhere. No, the real world is conflict. How do we solve it? So I think that if we create a bridge, well, not only create it, because I have a motto that it says that a bridge is meaningless without those willing to cross it. So we are all in this world, and we don't have to be out of the country to be a diaspora. If you just move on to live with somebody else, you're leaving your place of birth, let's say, and then you join with your husband, your wife, and then you create a diaspora there. You're moving out of something that was known to something that is unknown, and you start building it from there. And that's where you need this bridge, which is cultural intelligence, understanding the world of this other person. It's something very complex, but it's not difficult to achieve. And if we try to follow like this idea of, let's start with the root of the problem. I don't know my roots, let's say my identity. If I don't know my cultural awareness, if I don't have cultural identity, then I get lost, and then I start identifying with somebody, because as we come to this point, we need to know, or we need to be approved, or we need to something. So sometimes we are lost, and we need to align that life purpose that we have to our passion, to our interest. And that is when we find the way to cross through that bridge and to get connected with other people. And that all involves this subject of cultural intelligence, but also take us to the cultural intelligence, take us to the collective intelligence, take us to the emotional intelligence. It's just like a new world that if we start working on ourselves first, then we start crossing that bridge. We start knowing ourselves first, solving our issues first, solving our trauma, solving our root, and then we can go to the next step, which is the people around us. If I work on myself, then I can be doing a benefit to the world, because to fight, you need 2 people. If you don't engage, then who is going to fight, right? Well, it's easy to say, but it is complex doing it. And for that reason is that I have created this bridge that connects this world with the technology right now to serve humanity, where justice flows like a river, and where progress, for example, belongs to everybody. So if we are all thinking about how we can be prosperous, how can we be successful, then we will not focus so much on this conflict, but we will focus more on the ways, on the how to get there, and how, starting with me, starting with that part. But then, as conflict is a part of the community, then I was thinking, while I was writing my book, I guess we need to go back to our roots. And that's when I thought that as conflict arises from different needs, values, and vision for the future, it's necessary for the evolution of the communities going back to the roots, our ancestors, our indigenous wisdom. So many indigenous cultures, for example, they see conflict as part of natural cycles of growth. These cycles of growth, they manage in a way they all agree with. And I have, for example, known of one of our tribes in Colombia, South America. They tell you the rules, you know the rules in advance, and if you break those rules, you know what the punishment is. And although it's very difficult to see how they punish, because like today, in today's world, I have seen some of them, they come in a community and they expose this person that has done something against their agreement of living together in a community. And then they expose them in public. And for me, that is like a little bit like maybe to the extreme, but it's the rules, the agreements that they agreed with before starting a relationship in a community. So that, when managed well, it seems like the conflict leads to balance and renewal if we see it going back to the roots. But in modern conflict resolution, then we have other techniques like, let's say, active listening, empathy, creating common grounds, and methods that we can use to manage this conflict in a healthy way. Then they send us to the psychologists, but then people say that maybe it's too expensive to afford them, and then we just go to all other different sources. But sometimes when we do everything like self studying, for example, self-learning, we can see also that there are some other tools available now that we have this technology. With the good use of this technology, we can start incentivizing this part, some research. And if we go to the part where I suggest or would like to explore is how we can bring this cultural intelligence and ancestral wisdom, so they can be that bridge that connects all of us to solve these conflicts. So we can see how cultural intelligence and ancestral wisdom can help us bridge those divides, see? And let's see, for those that are not familiar with cultural intelligence, we're just understanding like the ability to understand and engage with people from different cultures in a meaningful way. As I was explaining before, even in your marriage, it's two different cultures. And then we just find out.
Mitzy, what do you think? Are you agreeing with all of this? Because you work with your culture, which is very different from American culture. I mean, to me, it seems like it must be, and because it's not too far, Andean, and I don't know if Andean includes I'm actually not really sure. Is Andean anything in? Help me out here. Is it?
I know what you're asking. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you and I have had conversations around growing up, how it felt a little too different. I'm
Yeah,
raised
right.
here in the US, but the value system and everything that was ingrained in me was very Bolivian, Peruvian, very Andean. And that, I think in a way it created almost an inner conflict, but
Yeah,
but the beauty of that inner conflict was that it allowed me to really see that things weren't always just one perspective.
right.
And even within the Andean worldview, they had a practice called, they had several practices, but the one that I'd like to speak to is called Chanin Chai. And Chanin Chai was something it was a strategy that was employed when conflict resulted into disharmony or an imbalance or a loss of property, right? But it was very important to understand that conflict wasn't necessarily bad. It was when it resulted in a loss of harmony or a loss of property, right? So this was more of like somebody stole my llama, and I want it back. And there's a dispute about that. Or somebody did something to my child, when it was almost like a legal injustice ramification. But even with the Chanin Chai, which the rough translation means to be equal or bring back whole or to be balanced, right? So even just the definition of that really kind of lends us to see just how that worldview from the Andean perspective was really just about respecting not just the people, but the nature and the community. And all of them required that fairness and respect. And that sometimes the conflict that becomes non-harmonious comes from a lack of respect or the perception of the lack of respect, which I think we all can see how the difference would be. And the three models of the Chanin Chai were dialogue, mediation, and a collaborative solution, meaning there would be like a group of people who were designated, maybe like the jurors to decide what would be the most harmonious response to restore balance back into the community. If there was a property loss, to restore that to the parties or the families that were, in question.
So there was community involvement then.
There was community involvement, absolutely, because most of the time if people were in disagreement or in conflict, it doesn't stay in a bubble. Even if you have conflict within yourself and
everybody.
you're fighting, that eventually flows over into your relationship with other people. But if you're fighting with your neighbor, you're eventually going to bring in like more allies, which again is a very natural thing for us to want to do. What's interesting is that, when we talk about the, resolving the conflict or restoring the harmony that might have been lost, it's not to say that everything was always like, okay, let's talk and then let's hug it out. There was a practice called Pampa Chai, which
hug it out. I like that.
Pampa Chai was a practice. It was more of a ritualistic ceremonial practice of when you just could not make amends. Like there was too much damage done. There was too many hurt feelings. There was no resolution available. Pampa Chai was the ceremony that was done so that at least the energies can be restored. And the Pampa Chai literally means flattening the land, and it had to do from an agricultural perspective of when you're planting new seeds, you're not going to just plant it with the old crop, the old remains, the old weeds. You got to take out the weeds. You got to take everything out. You've got to put in the new seeds, and then you have to flatten the land so that it can all sit together, right? So even after a Chanin Chai was done, the mediation process, this is the logistical aspect, a Pampa Chai would often follow to help ameliorate maybe the heavy energies that might have come for that, and I think it's kind of cool to see how some of our ancestors employed different ways when it came to unresolvable conflict. I have one last story. It has nothing to do with my tradition, but I always find this story super fascinating. It's about the Maya. The Maya had this game called the ball game. And it was based on their sacred book, the Popol Vuh. And it was a game, it was a ball game. You couldn't use your hands, you couldn't use your feet, you could only use your hips. And it was a sacred game, but it was very arduous on the body. And when there were moments in history when you read back that there were moments when they could not come to a resolution, when there was just no resolution to be found, where the relationship was broken and there was a stalemate, there was no way to come to anything, any agreement. They would at times bring it into the ball game. And in this ball game, whoever won is the one that would either receive the whatever it was that they were discussing. So what I really appreciate about that story is that, not all conflict reaches what we might rationally see as a resolution. And again, that goes back to what I was saying at first is, as we move forward as a society in this new paradigm where, there are going to be more conversations happen, there are going to be more things where we don't necessarily agree with each other. how do we distance ourselves from conflict and resolution and maybe begin to look at that a little bit differently, that it's okay that we have differences, just as long as there's fairness and respect, because that was, especially with the Andean communities, when there was a lack of fairness or a lack of respect, that's when really the community needed to step in. Other than that, it was just a difference of opinion, and people would need to find a way to respect that the other person had a different opinion. So it's interesting to see how the different ancestors would have employed different tactics. I imagine the ball game was not an easy game on the body, but there are situations where you just can't come to a solution, and this was how they, like, what, you won. The other people may feel a little salty about it or a certain way, but at least there is a definitive closure to the topic. Maybe not one that everyone agrees on, but now the peace and the harmony the process of bringing harmony can be brought back now that there is a closure to the issue at hand.
Interesting.
That's what I was saying also, that seeing how these communities, how the indigenous traditions, such as what you have said, Mitzy, these circles, storytelling, or ceremonial processes, offer valuable tools for healing and rebuilding this relationship after conflict. Because after conflict, there is another relationship. And that's what I was saying, understanding this and put it into the context of wherever you are in the world. As I was saying, cultural intelligence is not just about learning how to communicate with each other, but also it's about tapping into the collective wisdom that we have and see these existing communities in the real life. And I admire too much, very much, particularly these indigenous and marginalized communities, because they have a long story of navigating conflict and creating sustainable solutions, and we're not listening there. We are just trying to go out of it. And I think that I would like also to know the opinion of Shannon on this.
Yes, I was wondering that too.
Yes,
And you're muted, Shannon, so remember to
they're
unmute.
trying to do this bridge.
Yeah,
Yes.
I really appreciate it. I was just, listening, it's a listening and reflecting. I appreciated what you were saying about history and identity and culture, and being having that cultural, what I call cultural humility. It really is, understanding. And then the other thing that I was hearing and thinking about is that the importance of process, the importance of, I read a book a number of years ago as I was looking at in our world and our health systems, and we always talk about evidence-based practices, and of course we know that doesn't include, has not traditionally included our indigenous knowledge and our ways of knowing and our ways of measurement, which existed pure, way before European contact. And what is it that we know that works? And this book that I read was called Witch Doctors and Psychiatrists. And what they were looking at, I thought it was written in the 80s by a doctor who, and his name is escaping me now, but he worked in a large psychiatric hospital in New York, Bellevue. And so what he was trying to look at was, why is it, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a psychiatrist, whether it's a shaman, people get better? So what is it that is common and core to each of those relationships, interventions, practices, right? And in the book they explored this, and it, to me, even in this conversation, I'm like, what I'm trying to think about deeply about is what's core?
Core, as in C-O-R-E.
Yeah, C-O-R-E.
Central.
What's common
Yeah.
and appears to be core, regardless of whether I have one cultural lens or another cultural lens. And because I think there lies, at least when Lilian was talking about the collective wisdom in the traditions that I come from, we always talk about mending the sacred hoop of humanity and what it's going to take to do that. And we never talk about, oh, it's just one group of people that is going to mend the sacred hoop of humanity. We say it's all directions, all colors of mankind, all intelligence, whether that intelligence comes from the Eastern tradition, the Western tradition, a Northern tradition, a Southern tradition, that all of those things collectively are what is necessary to heal that sacred hoop of humanity. So all of that, as Lily was saying, that collective intelligence, that collective wisdom is where that lies. So when I'm thinking about conflict, that's what was going on in my head, was kind of like, well, okay, and a couple of things that I saw is, one, you have to have a belief that something will work, right?
So you have to be positive.
Just at a core, you have to believe that things can get better, right? In some way, right? And then you have to have a process. And like I said before, I don't think are there elements within the processes that are the same or need to be the same? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, but it appears that there needs to be a process.
Yes.
Right? And whether that process is, I resolve conflict by going outside of my house and turning around 4 times, or I am able to work with conflict if I attend to myself in this way, doesn't, to me, those are the things that I think together we can discover. And what Lilian was saying about, I can only discover that in that kind of place where we come together in that aligned perspectives kind of thing. If I know history, identity, and culture. And we have
agreed upon, right?
What we've done, unfortunately, we haven't done a very good job to date of really sharing our histories and being attentive to each other's history. Right.
Well, if some of those people aren't agreeing that a certain group of people don't have the right to think what they think or have the right to want something, then that's a huge problem. I mean, we're seeing that now.
Yeah, then is when it goes to the personal thing. And then I would like to point to things like, number one is like, let's see this as a strategy that sometimes works. If somebody says that is angry, upset, or something like that because somebody did not call him or her, then this person is making it personal because it's using the word him or her. So I'll explain myself better with this example. He didn't call me. She didn't call me. But if you say she or he did not call and you take the word me out of it, you don't make it personal. Then your process thinks that something may have happened that did not allow this person to call. But when you put the me, you take it personal. Oh, it's because she or he doesn't like me, doesn't have time for me. Or that's where cultural intelligence goes there, to try to understand the other part, to try to understand or see things farther than that. So there are tools that are for the modern world and there are some other tools from the ancestors. If we try to combine them with this bridge, let's see, for example, in the modern world, we have active listening. It's just so difficult for people nowadays to sit down and just listen to the other person because everybody's in this rush, and nobody has time to listen to the other. So then we just heard something or overheard something and we build over it. And then, as you were saying, this conflict is in there. We never talk about it out and on time. And when it goes up, it adds up more things. And then it's when conflict arrives.
It festers.
Yes, so then we need to use this active listening tool because it's like important to see what are the truly hearing, the truly feelings of the other person, the true feelings of the other person. So the importance of truly healing is there in solving what is in me, what is bothering me, letting the other person know how she or he makes me feel. But in a moment, looking for the best scenario, let's say, as you were suggesting, if I am angry right now, in this moment, don't talk to me right now. I'm not ready to talk to you right now. I'm going for a walk. And when we come back, we can start talking on whatever the issue was. So hearing others and creating a space for empathy. I think that today, empathy is a word that is almost out of the vocabulary in everybody's, worldwide.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know what it means.
Yeah,
So-
like the young kids, this new generation, I don't know if they will know the words that we use. And that takes me to the tool number 2 in the modern world. We can use like this dialogue and shared solutions. Like if we, for example, think that we should go to a psychologist, to a what is the other word?
Psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist. Well, that's respectable. I admire that study too. But then is seeing things through the other person's view and not from my own perspective. If I go deeper into that, then I'll go in to explain more about this in a second with the Ho'oponopono. Then we can do this restorative in ourselves, restorative process, right? So that takes me to the other strategies, which are like the ancestral wisdom. But I just like it. I know my family has like some roots from our ancestors back in Colombia. And I have observed some of the things. Unfortunately, I was not taught the language, but I saw some of the things that they were doing. And it took me to explore this other diaspora I found about the Ho'oponopono with these 4 words, that if you think of a person, you don't even have to have the person in front of you to say that you are sorry. Sometimes it's just so difficult for people to say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. And then you just say, forgive me, but like mean it. Because sometimes we just say, oh yeah, just forgive me, but we don't mean it. And that's important. When you say thank you to the other person because it's teaching you a lesson, or maybe it's somebody that is being used for you to learn something, to grow on aspects that you don't know you have to work on, then that's when you say thank you for the situation. Thank you for that person. I'm not saying that we need to be thanking for the conflict, but for the lesson that this situation is making me see. And sometimes we forget to ask ourselves, what is that thing that has put me into this situation? And then it's going back to ourselves. And then the 4th word is I love you, but sometimes I see the word love, or the sentence "I love you" is used just like not meaning that you do love somebody, that you do love the person for what he or she is. And everybody says, "I love you, I love you, I love you." And sometimes it's just like more towards this meaning of what our ancestors have told us. That legacy, I think, is the solution that is going to connect all this world together. And I might be a little bit optimistic, but I think we can get it there. So it's just
Well, I hope so, because we're certainly coming into some, well, we've already been there, but I think we're coming into some fairly traumatic times. And I'm, I'm trying to be optimistic, but it just seems really
yeah,
scary.
with the right tools, it can be transformed into a pathway of unity.
Well, I think we should elect us all to be at the top here, making Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, let's try.
Well, I'm looking at the time and we've been having an interesting discussion. Let's just have some closing words from everybody, and also I want you to mention how people can get a hold of you, find out more. Let's see, Mitzy, how about you start?
Great. Yeah, I thought this was really an insightful conversation. Lily, congratulations on the book that's coming out. I'm looking forward to getting a copy and witnessing a little bit deeper just this conversation that I think we've all been having, but to kind of have it come in a little bit more of a concrete way. Just kind of bridging the ideas of how we see conflict in the modern world, but also bringing some of that ancestral wisdom in there. Between both, we have some really beautiful wisdom that can help our trajectory forward in humanity. And there's also a lot of stories from both sides where just things didn't work out, So I think it really humanizes our relationship with conflict. How, in society in the past, it may not have served us, and even now, how it could really lead to our eventual destruction, self-destruction as a human species. But I think that the hope is very much there. I think that there is a lot of supporting energies that are around us. So many elders, indigenous wise people believe the same thing. That there's a lot of supporting energies here for us that we as the human citizens can determine like how we use that. So it's a great time for us to be looking at just some of the fundamentals of our right action, our right loving, and our right seeing, right? So, in the Andean cosmovision, each of these have a very specific name, but they're tied into our ability to act from a place that's correctly, to see from a place that's unfogged and clear, and to love from a place that is in complete harmony with everything around us. Maybe
And
it
you
is
see that's coming.
that simple.
The prophecies say that that's coming.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, arguably it's here.
Yes. It may not be real obvious to some, but but the energy is there, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Shannon.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry.
that's it. Just wanted to close with that. My website is calvache.net. There I kind of explore different, I have 3 different spokes. One of them is exploring the self through workshops that are based on the Andean cosmovision. I also have advocacy and awareness. This is kind of really just delving a little bit deeper into my advocacy work that I do and different events and gatherings that are happening around the world that people can either support or participate in. And yeah, so if anybody's interested in coming to that site, it's just connecting me as a bridge, connecting people to the communities that are talking about this widely for anyone who's curious to be more on that path.
And you're very visible in social media too, so it's I mean, I found it. And I know you're very
Yeah.
busy with a lot of really amazing events. So thank you for all the work that you do. Shannon.
Thanks,
Is there-
Jana. I was just thinking as you were talking, I was like, well, I began with the language when I said Anin Indue Maganak, which is hello and greetings to my relatives. And I was reflecting on what Lilian was saying about language and about the removal of the me. And I
The
was
we
thinking
consciousness.
about how that's embedded in our indigenous languages. And
Yeah.
so the way that we speak again goes back to the way that we think. And one of the things that so part of the process is changing the language, changing our language around conflict, changing our language. And then I just wanted to leave you with, as Lilian was saying, people use the word love, love, love. And we live in the world of acronyms. So there's an acronym for everything, right? So I use the word love as an acronym. How do we take that word love and we actually implement it to an action? So love stands for listen, offer what it is that you have to offer, validate the other person's experience, and empathy.
Wow.
Oh,
I like
So
that.
if you use that, that's love in action. Listen, offer, validate, and empathize. And applying that in the world of conflict, I think will be helpful. So in terms of finding me, you can find me through We.
Mhm.
And that's probably the best way. I'm kind of all over the place.
Yes,
And
you are.
there are so many efforts. Find the place that resonates with you.
Mhm.
There's so many, because conflict does not exist in one dimension, in one system, in one community. It exists everywhere. So find the place that resonates with you, that you can, explore deeper about how we collectively are moving forward in a world that looks at conflict differently than we've looked at in the past. So thank you. And yeah, Minabamazwan, keep on the good path, everybody. So
Yeah, and also I wanted to add that, well, because as you are a member of we've had a lot of conversations collectively as a team. You're pointing out all the words that we have in our language that are just like Inger words, like the fight to do this,
right,
and
well, everything, even in our our evaluation and research, what are the words that we use?
mhm,
Capture. What do we do when we give money to people for a particular, say there's a grant or whatever? Who are we serving? A target population.
yes.
What? I don't want to be a target. I've been a target all along. So the one of my elders said that the English language was the most violent language in the world.
Yeah.
And so if we think about becoming trauma informed, and we're going to trip on our tongues. Anytime we learn a new language, we trip on our tongues, right?
Yeah, I
So,
sure do.
well, and so, allowing each other grace when that
Yeah.
happens, and I worked in a community where there was a lot of conflict. It was, kind of internal fighting was happening, and kind of what lateral oppression and those kinds of things were going on. And one day we decided we needed to do something about it. Well, we created something. We created a word. And the word we created was Anina. So if Jana was coming to me and she said, that Mitzy, blah, 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 I could just say Anina. And all that meant was do over. Or I could be going down a path of, in my language or talking about or doing something that was negative, and I could stop myself. I could just say Anina. And I'll tell you, the first few weeks of implementing that, oh my gosh, the offices, you could hear Ani Na probably every other word. It was all over the place. But after 2 weeks, you heard it much less.
I'll have to remember that.
There was no judgment about it. Just, it was literally permission to do it differently. No judgment when you screwed up, just do over, right? And so, let's do over. And we just keep, when we know better, we do better. So, and I am so appreciative, Lilian and Mitzy and Jana, of being able to be in this circle with all of you. So, Chimigwech, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Lily, you're going to take us out, I think. So,
Thank you so very much. Yeah, so 2 things to say before we go. Well, it has been a pleasure to have to know Mitzy and Shannon. I think we need more people like them. Also,
and you.
and all the team, We the World and all the team, and all of us that are working worldwide to be this bridge that connects what needs to be connected, but most importantly, aligned to what the world was at the beginning. We were not like to the point we are right now. Not everything is bad, not everything is good, it's just different. But we are the ones that can lead the way where it goes. Today, and it goes to where you can find me. I work at Minority Consulting International, my website. My company is the bridge that connects technology and humanity, empowering organization, because we can also put our heart right there. So we can also drive this justice, equity, and sustainability through innovative solutions, not forgetting our roots, not forgetting who we are. So I think that if we, as business, as activists, as whoever we are in the world, we align this philosophy of love, as Shannon explained, is so beautiful. Shannon, I'm just so like, wow, it's the first time I hear that. And I like it. Thank you for that. And I would like your permission to use it in some of my conversations with other people too. Because it is the meaning of what we say, it's the words that come out of our heart that comes to heal or harm the world. And these communities where we are, we need to create these inclusive systems. We need to stop just thinking just small, as Shannon was saying, and Mitzy was saying. We are in this world with global challenges. Not everything is perfect, not everything is a color of a rose, but there are also the thorns, like poverty, climate change, and inequality, but I guess that's another topic of conversation. However, together, we build a better future, right? So I think we need to work on progress, but also need to remember that not everything is to be done from scratch. There is these ancestors that were teaching us some wisdom, and let's find what we think this is working. Let's take it with us. Let's be like a book that has only white pages and write down our own book and see what is good from this culture, what is good from this person, what I think is helping me, because then we will go to another subject for maybe another conversation. What you think is good may not be good for somebody else, and it goes from there. But I am very optimistic that we are doing a good job, and I think 2025 is going to switch to something that is going to bring us together in this unity and world of peace that we all deserve. And thank you so much
Wonderful.
for the invitation.
Yeah, well, thank you. So we can be bridge builders and bridge menders or tenders, bridge tenders, like tending the fire. We can tend to the bridge and keep it strong and with
I
love.
remember, the bridge. My motto is: the bridge is meaningless without those willing to cross it. So
that's right. Okay, wow. Thank you. Thank you to Birgit Ben-Eli, our events director, and my tech person for today. Thank you to Lily, Mitzy, and Shannon
Thank you
for
to
being
the
with us
too.
today. And thank you for joining our broadcast today. Remember, please join us and take action to be of service at we.net/MLK. And donations are gratefully appreciated and welcome at we.net/donate. Goodbye from all of us at We the World.